So welcome everyone. My name is Kathy Dewick and I'm the coordinator of the Pathway to Stewardship and Kinship. Now this is a community partnership that's centered around Peterborough, Ontario. I think most of our crowd tonight are people who live close to Peterborough. Basically, it's a partnership between people in the education, health, and environment sectors. And our goal is to work with kids of all ages, spanning the time from birth through until graduation from secondary school, so the late teen years. And our goal is to help kids build strong, lifelong relationships with the world around them, both our natural world and our human community. And through building those caring relationships, we hope to help kids build skills also for taking care of the world that we all share. Because we all tend to want to protect what we love. Now, the Pathway Project is built around a series of landmarks or key experiences focusing on various stages of a child's development. And tonight we're focusing on one of our early years landmarks, landmark number 7, which includes sharing stories about the natural world. And I would also like to acknowledge the wonderful support of the Ontario Trillium Foundation, which makes it possible for us to do this work and makes it possible to make workshops like this available to you free of charge. So tonight, this event is also sponsored by the Pathway Project in partnership with Investing in Quality Peterborough. I think many of you probably work with the people at IIQ Peterborough who focus on working with early childhood educators. So I would like to acknowledge that we live and work and are meeting tonight on the traditional and treaty territories of the Mississauga Anishinaabe, who have been stewards of these lands and waters for millennia. We are so grateful to live in this wonderful place, and we're so grateful for the teachings of the Anishinaabe. And we try to honor those teachings in all of the work we do, including the content of our program tonight. Now, I think that a love of stories is something that's embedded in our DNA. I think it's part of being human. Stories are a very powerful tool to reach deeply into our hearts and can shape how we view the world. And tonight we'll be focusing on telling stories, building skills for those working with very young children. So we'll be focusing on children from birth to roughly kindergarten age tonight. So I'm very delighted tonight to introduce to you two of my favorite people. First of all, Kate Jarrett is trained as a children's librarian. She's a musician and storyteller, and she specializes in working with young children and young families. And she has co-coordinated the Parent-Child Mother Goose program in the Peterborough area for many years. And that's a program that helps parents build skills and confidence with music, rhymes, and stories with their young children. And I'd also, and Kate, maybe I could ask you just to say hello and then we can see your picture. Will come up on the screen.
Hi, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Kate.
It's good to be here with you tonight.
And our other guest tonight is Nancy Doherty. And Nancy is an early childhood educator and consultant working with Peterborough Child and Family Centers, and is also an instructor at Fleming College in the early childhood education department. And Nancy has delighted many families with young children over many years with her stories and her work with Peterborough Child and Family Centers. So welcome, Nancy. Do you want to say a hello to us, Nancy, so we can see your picture on the screen?
It's nice to see everyone here. I see familiar names out there.
Now I'm going to try and be the timekeeper here. Nancy and Kate are going to be tossing the ball back and forth to each other. And and Nancy is going to get the ball rolling. And the first question that I'm going to ask Nancy is, why do you love sharing stories with children?
So I am going to talk about, to begin with, why I love storytelling with children. And when I thought about this, the first thing that came to mind was my feeling that I have from when I was a child, and how I remember my mother in particular telling me stories, and how we would sit close together. She would read to me, and she did that on into my older years when I could definitely read by myself. So I have that real feeling of warmth about storytelling. And then the other thing about storytelling that I know now is how important it is for children as they're learning and growing and developing. And it's important for their brain development. We know that it is a literacy tool, but it's also a tool for introducing early math concepts, those feelings of empathy for other people. It's important for children to learn about the bigger world out there and develop that sense of wonder. So that is why I love storytelling with children. So I am going to pass it over to Kate now.
My love of storytelling, same for me, is something that I grew up with in terms of my family telling stories. But I also think it also grew from the two different parts of my own personal story, that of being a children's librarian, being very tied to books and stories, as well as to my work with the Parent Child Mother Goose program, which is all based on oral traditions, oral language, telling stories and rhymes with parents and their young children. And I think both of those things have just come together in this delight in being able to share stories, whether they're read or whether they're told.
Okay, thank you, Kate. And I'm going to toss the ball back to Nancy to talk about telling stories with props and what helps to make a story appealing.
So yeah, I want to talk about why I choose the stories that I choose to read to children. And so I'm going to show a short clip. I did a little video of myself telling a story using props. And the story is Sadie and the Snowman. I don't know if you're familiar with this story about this little girl who builds a snowman again and again. So I'm going to just show a short clip of this video. It may not be able to hear it very well, but that's okay. What I want you to do is look at the setup and the props that I've tried to show you. So I'm going to share. I'm going to tell you the story about Sadie and the Snowman. One day, it was cold and snowy, and Sadie went into her backyard and she made a snowball. And then she made two more. And she rolled them and rolled them. Can you help me roll the big snowball? And she used cookies for the eyes, an apple for the nose, and a yellow banana for the mouth. And it was a good snowman, and it lasted a really long time. And then one day the sun came out and it started to melt the snowman. And the birds ate the cookies. A squirrel ran away way with the apple. And a big raccoon came and got that yellow banana. Okay, so I just wanted you to see that you can tell stories many different ways. And so you can start by reading the book. I like this story because it's about a very strong little girl. She is smart, she's able to problem solve, she deals with her emotions because she gets disappointed. So she's a strong character. So that's one reason I like this book, and I like to choose a story that has some really interesting characters in it. And then I also like this story because it has some repetition in it. So she makes the snowman again and again, and it's the same thing. First she makes a snowball, and then she makes another, and then she rolls them and rolls them and rolls them. And then she uses cookies for the eyes. And the next time she uses crackers for the eyes. And then the third time she uses raisins for the eyes because the snowman gets smaller and smaller. So there's all of that repetition that I think is really important. There's also a chance for us to involve the children in the story. So they can put the cookies on, they can put the apple on, they can help roll the snowballs, get them moving a little bit, so that engagement in the story through physical involvement is really important. I liked that the animals, so when we think about our pathways landmarks, the first one is being outside, especially for those first three early years landmarks. So being outside, so Sadie's outside, she's in her backyard, she's not somewhere fancy or spending money. She's doing something very simple in her backyard, and I really love that. It's repetitious. It also involves the animals, which is another one of our landmarks, where in the story, the birds eat the eyes, and the bunny, no, not the bunny, the squirrel eats the nose, and the big raccoon comes and eats the mouth. Every time those animals come and they eat those pieces. But Sadie rebuilds the snowman, and the next time she adds something different for the eyes and nose and mouth, but the animals still keep coming back. So there's that element of understanding animals in your neighborhood and being aware and being able to share with the animals. Even though she didn't really plan to do that, she was okay with it. And then the other part of that story is if you do look at the book, you'll see the pictures are nice and bright. They're engaging because this little squirrel, how many times have you seen this little squirrel in your backyard or out when you're out for a walk? So I really think the pictures are a big part of a book. Kate's going to talk more about books, so I'm not going to focus on the book tonight. And then the other piece around that story is using the props. So I used the pieces of wool because it's something that's it's movable. It's like the snow. It's not always perfect. You saw when I made my snowballs, they weren't perfect. But then you can put them in your pocket and take them with you if you go outside, and you can tell the story. If I was going to do this outside, I might use a darker color of yarn so that you could see it against the snow. Or I might take a mat or something like that outside so that I could do it. I used a yoga mat in my house so that I had a plain background. So it's portable. The food is a fun part of that because it's real. You can tell the story with a felt board. You can read the book. You can tell it in a whole myriad of ways. But by using the real elements of food, it's a connection for the children, right? You could even eat lunch after you had read this story. So there's lots of things that I think are really engaging with the story. So when I look at a story, I look for those things. I look for a character. The animals are often a big part for children. The repetition. In that story, there's not a lot of rhyming, but there's a cadence to the way the story is told, because she rolled one snowball and then she rolled two more, and she rolled them and she rolled them. And so we know what's coming next, and the sort of listening to the sound is soothing and inviting. So that's the reason I like that story, and what I would look for if I were looking in a story to tell children, so that they could be involved in it, so that it's fun for them, it relates to them, they understand that story. They could recreate that. They could go out and they could try and build a story together, and so they'll have a shared experience then. So those are the reasons that I would choose a story like that. The other thing in that story is there's a change in the seasons. So it's winter when she builds her first snowman, and she keeps getting more snow, but then the sun's getting brighter, the days are getting longer, the grass is coming through. So there's that real connection to that change in seasons, which I think for us in Peterborough, in Ontario, we can relate to those changes in seasons, and that's another part of involving nature in your storytelling, being aware of those seasons and how they can impact the lives of the children also, because things change. It can be a real teachable moment. We can use that as a teachable moment as well. So there's lots of reasons, and I think I am going to pass it over to Kate now, because I think I've extended my time.
Thanks, Nancy. So I am going to put on my librarian hat and talk about, there's books about nature are so plentiful. And I personally feel they're a wonderful way. I see them as a stepping stone, really, from sharing something that is in a book, in a story, and then taking it outside. So what I'm going to do tonight is just give you a few examples of some books that I found and how I would take them outside after I've shared them with some children. You know, it's a way to really pique a child's interest in the outdoors by starting first with a book and seeing what they notice, what they observe within the story, and then being able to take it outside. And of course, as Nancy mentioned, every story is tied to the Pathways landmarks, and I really believe that reading stories together with children just enhances and builds those connections to the outdoors. So I often look for, how do the words and the pictures blend together? You know, children, pleasure comes to them through their eyes and also their ears. So you're developing this lovely literacy of language and visual arts. And I'm going to start by just showing this book called Trees. And as you can see, it's got a beautiful, beautiful tree on the front, but it's just not the artwork that works, it's the language inside. So here it says, trees are lovely. No, trees love the sky. They love all that blue above them. Trees love clouds. They reach high to touch them. Now look at this picture, look at the perspective. It's looking up at a tree. And what a wonderful thing that you could do with children is to go outside in all seasons and look up, 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 up to the tops of the trees and see what you can see. Days, they hold out their limbs for songbirds to come. So look at this gorgeous, beautiful picture with birds in those limbs. And then one more, nights, they hold out their limbs for stars and moon. I mean, what a magical picture of a tree holding up all those stars. And I just think that, again, the combination of the art and the words make this a really lovely book to share with children. But then what would I do with it outside? Well, I always like to ask questions. So I would say, let's go outside and look at trees. What trees do you see? Do you see trees that look the same? Are they different? What's your favorite tree? Look up in the tree. Do you see any animals or birds? Let's go closer to the tree. Feel what the bark is like. Is it rough? Is it smooth? So many questions. You could start with a book about trees and then go out and explore trees. The other thing I look for is very simple text and language. This is a book called Blue Sky. Audrey Wood is one of my favorite author illustrators. She wrote King Big Boots in the Bathtub. But this is a concept book. And again, language, 2 words on each page. Blue sky. You see a page full of a blue sky, children looking up at it. Even the word blue is in blue. When you turn the page, cloud sky. The word cloud is made out of clouds. And each page has 2 words describing a different kind of sky. So again, I would take this outside and I would go, let's look up at the sky. Let's look at the sky in the morning, at lunchtime, at dinner time, and look at the differences. Do you see clouds up in the sky? Do you see shapes in those clouds? How many of you remember lying on your back, looking up at clouds and trying to see shapes in them? So a book about weather, but so simple, and it doesn't overload the child with too much information. Simple and basic. There are a lot of books that are information picture books. This one is called Paddle, Perch, Climb, Bird Feet Are Neat. Now, how many of you have ever thought about bird feet? Well, I hadn't really thought about it until I saw this book. And again, it's asking, the pictures are large, the text is small, and it asks a question. If you had long, slender legs and toes, what could you do? Well, wade like a heron to sneak up on a school of fish. Or if you have small, flexible toes, you could perch like a cardinal to pick some berries. So again, there are 2 birds that you might see around Peterborough. I know when I go into Jackson Park, there's always a heron there. There are cardinals in my backyard, but I would go outside and I would maybe start by saying, what do your feet do? If your feet do that for you, let's think about bird feet. Are they large feet? Are they small feet? See what you can do to observe those feet of birds. Oh, and the other part, a lot of picture books now, you don't have to know everything about bird feet, because a lot of books now have a wonderful section for parents and educators, teachers. Bird feet are really neat. So you get much more information about bird feet. Here, I wonder what makes a bird a bird. Bird watching tips. Also information about how the pictures in this book were made. So another great conversation to have with young children. So a great, like in this book, so much that can offer you and the children you work with. I would be remiss not to mention wordless picture books, because I think they're an unsung treasure. The library has a whole bin of books that have no words, just pictures. This is one of my favorites. It's called Sidewalk Flowers. It's a bit of an urban tale. And the lovely thing is the pictures are all in black and white, except for our heroine, who's in red. No words. So a child now can tell you the story by following this little girl on her adventures. she's going for a walk. And what does she see growing up through the cracks in the sidewalk but some flowers? So she decides to pick them. And then the charm of this story is that she uses those flowers to deliver random acts of kindness to animals and people that she meets along the way. So what a great book. Again, take it outside, go on your walk. What do you see growing up in the cracks in the sidewalk? And think about your neighborhood, your community. Are the things that you could be doing, that like some kind things to a neighbor to help out? So sidewalk flowers, wordless. And my final book is also that whole idea of Nancy was saying, what engages children and makes them interactive? So many great books do that. One of my favorite authors is Christy Matheson. She has a book, here's another bird book, but this is a counting book, but it's also an I Spy book. So you turn the pages and there's all kinds of things that you have to look for. But the one that she's most popular, well, most well known for, I think, and I'm hoping most of you know about this book, because it is indeed magical. It's called Tap the Magic Tree. And it is so wonderful to have a child actually participate in telling the story. So there's magic in this bare brown tree. Tap it once and turn the page to see. So they do that, they turn and, oh, look, what do they see? There's a leaf on that tree. And then they do all kinds of things. They either tap or they rub, they blow a kiss, they jiggle the book. So the book becomes so much a part of them telling. And also it takes a tree through all the seasons. And I think that is another wonderful connection, as Nancy mentioned before, is that we can see all those seasons through this book, and they can start observing that in a book, but then when they go outside. And I'm just going to end my part with telling a little story. We've been sitting for a while. If any of you feel like standing up and turning yourselves into a tree, then please join me. This is a song called I'm a Trunk. And oh, this is my trunk. So I'm turning myself into a tall tree. And of course, my roots go down all the way down. I'm going to lean over, but you can just do the actions and join in. And it goes like this. And again, it takes a tree through all the seasons. This is my trunk. I'm a tall, tall tree. In the springtime, the blossoms grow on me. They open, they open. This is my trunk. I'm a tall, tall tree. In the summer, the breezes blow through me. I bend, I bend. This is my trunk. I'm a tall, tall tree. In the autumn, the apples grow on me. They drop, they drop. This is my trunk. I'm a tall, tall tree. In the winter, the snowflakes fall on me. Brr, brr. And that's the story. I'll turn it over to Nancy.
Thanks, Kate. You're a hard act to follow. That was fun. So now I'm going to talk about what sparks a story. So I think that all of you who are educators have lots of experience and lots of knowledge about telling stories. But sometimes we're looking for something, some new ideas, some different ideas. And these may not be new, but I'm just gonna, I wanted to share a few things that I think spark stories for children. And the first thing is setting up an environment where it's comfortable for children to sit. There's fewer distractions, perhaps. It's a softer kind of environment. And that can be outdoors and that can be indoors. And outdoors, it's nice if you have a place where you can sit under a tree, a tall, tall tree, or you can sit beside a rock or a soft grassy spot. Or if you have an enclosure, I know some of you in childcare have a like a sunshade area that you could sit under and just have kind of a cozy area to sit. It sort of marks the place, the special place where you can come and sit together and hear a story. And indoors, because we tell lots of stories in both of those spaces, indoors, it's nice also to have a space. And if you can make it a quieter space, I know that's tricky in your rooms because there's lots of busy children and there's lots of action going on. But if you can have a little den or a nook or a little corner of some kind where you can put some soft things that children can gather in there to listen to stories or to tell their own stories. I really like the idea of having a rug. So it doesn't have to be a big rug, but a small, this is just a little small door rug that you can use to set up your stories. And so an example of something that I might put on that rug is this basket. I don't know if you can see in this basket, but it has some cedar and it smells really good. It has a pine cone and some red willow. And it also has a few little animal friends, a little owl, little bunny, and a beaver. So if you have this set up in your space, you might have read a story. In my list of stories, there's one called The Hike. And I really like that story because it's about 3 little children who go off following a path through the woods. And there's so much for them to see on that hike. But maybe you've read something like that in order to sort of give them some context, or maybe you've come back from a walk where you've asked some of those questions like Kate just referred to, about what they're seeing and what they're smelling and what they're hearing while they're out there. So this might just be something that they might like to take and spark their imagination and tell a story or set up something so that they could create their own little animal world. So something like that, it's very simple. This is another one of my main things that I believe in, that we don't have to have a lot of fancy props. We can use things from nature. We can borrow things. We may have things in our house that we can use, but to keep it as simple as possible, because then you're more apt to do it. You're more apt to pull that out and provide that for those children. So that's a nice way to introduce some thinking about the sounds and smells and the sights in nature. Another thing that I like is to be able to extend a story. So like the Sadie and the Snowman story, but to be able to have to tell a story and maybe tell it using some props. So I have this story, The Mitten. I don't know if you know this story, but it's a fun story, and it's got amazing pictures, and you can really see something new every time you look. Now this is the board book version, and that's one thing. Another nice thing that I really love is they're making a lot of books in this format, the board books, for the little guys. And a lot of you work with toddlers who like to put things in their mouths still, and they're kind of rough when they're turning the pages. So a book like this is really sturdy and will stand up probably a little bit longer than the paper books. So this book, The Mitten, it's about a little guy who asks his grandma, his baba, to knit him some mittens, and he wants them as white as the snow. And I have to tell you, I just used this story outside today. I did a story time in the park this morning, and I just used it. And the most amazing thing was we had this blanket of white snow. So we didn't have to set anything up. It was all there. Nature provided for us. So if the story is a little guy, he gets his Baba to knit him some white mittens, as white as the snow. So when you put this on the snow, it blends in. And that's what his grandma says to him. You're going to lose those mittens because it will blend in with the white snow. And he said, I still want white mittens. So of course, the first thing that happens is he drops a mitten in the snow. And when he drops the mitten in the snow, animals come along and they crawl into the mitten. And the first thing to crawl into the mitten is, where'd he go? Oh, there he is, the mole. So this isn't exactly a mole, but he's sort of a mole. And he's going to crawl into the mitten. So I want to show you this. This is a big mitten. This is a small mitten. So by the end of the story, all of the animals, the mole, I'm not going to tell you the whole story. I know you know this story. The mole, the badger, the hedgehog. I don't think we have hedgehogs in Peterborough. And that's a really good thing to talk about. Find out where this hedgehog would live. Where he must live somewhere where there's snow, but I don't know where. But I'll have to find out. Maybe if I look on in the back of the book, maybe I'd find it like Kate suggested. So the hedgehog, the owl, it's getting bigger and bigger because all of these animals are climbing in. The fox. Oh, these animals. So you can get these, and I'm reading the chat. Sorry, Kathy, I'll answer this question right now. You can get these animals at the toy shop in Peterborough. They have a really great selection of animals. You can probably get them online using one of the toy suppliers that a lot of you will use in your work. But I like to encourage people to go to buy local if they can. The bear, you're welcome. And the last thing to climb in is a little mouse. And he climbs into that mitten. And when he climbs in, he sits on the nose of the bear. And the bear's nose gets tickly. And okay, shoo, all of the animals fly out. And this is a fun part to do with children because they love to help you fly the animals out. And being outside, you can do that kind of thing more easily than you can when you're indoors. Anyway, you know the story, you know how it ends. But so this mitten, we had somebody knit it for us, and it's a big mitten, but you could make it out of felt too, which would be fun to have, to be able to do that. Involving the children like the repetition. They like to remember which animal went in next. They like to do that sequencing. So I see that I'm getting close to my 10 minutes. So I did have a few other things that I want to talk about, but maybe I'll be able to squeeze it in at the end. But I am going to let Kate have a turn. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. So I'm going to start with a rhyme and you're welcome to do this with me. Here is the earth. Here is the sky. Here are my friends. And here am I. I'll do it one more time. Here is the earth. Here is the sky. Here are my friends. And here am I. So, you know, oral traditions and telling stories are, as opposed to reading stories, is really a powerful way to communicate and connect. It also nurtures the art of listening. And I think that's a really important aspect of being able to tell stories. And why would you tell a story as opposed to reading a story? Well, telling a story that you know by heart and is in your head, it's practical. It doesn't require any equipment. It doesn't cost anything. It's so portable. And you have such a ready, accepting audience. Children love, 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 love to hear stories. And if you're one of those people that go, I could never tell a story, I just want to read stories. Well, I'm here to encourage you. And some of the ways that you might start thinking about telling stories is starting with rhymes. Rhymes are short little stories. Sometimes they're only 4 lines long. You can learn a story that's only 4 lines long. And the thing is, the simple rhymes, they're rhythmic, they're easy to remember, and they don't expire. They grow with the child. So a rhyme that might start as a tickle or a bouncing rhyme with a baby can grow into a finger play for a toddler or a preschooler, and then grow into a bigger movement like our tree story did. So they're a wonderful place to start. And you already have a great repertoire of stories in rhymes. Think about something you already know. I was just thinking of the Incy Spider, classic story. And I hope many of you would know that already. Lovely little story about a spider that climbs up a water spout. That could start as a little teeny weeny spider. You could grow that spider a little bigger and then make it a great big spider. And that's only the beginning. You take that little rhyme outdoors. You start looking for spiders. Where would you find spiders? What are spiders' homes like? And I don't know if you've ever had the chance of looking at a spider web as the sun comes through it in the morning. It is just awe-inspiring. It's so beautiful. So those are the kinds of things you can explore with a rhyme, a little story that you already know. The other thing is often people are making new words for traditional rhymes. And I just learned this one, and I know there's snow on the ground, but we do know that it is getting warmer and gardening season will be upon us. And I'm going to put up my hand and you'll know this familiar rhyme, but it's got some new words. This little piggy dug a garden. This little piggy sowed the seeds. This little piggy brought the water. And this little piggy pulled the weeds. And this little piggy rolled around in the mud as happy as could be. I'll do it one more time. This little piggy dug the garden. This little piggy sowed the seeds. This little piggy brought the water. And this little piggy pulled the weeds. And this little piggy rolled around in the mud as happy as could be. So again, looking for things that are familiar to you that you already know is a great way to boost your confidence, right? As you're learning, how do I take a story that I may already know and be able to tell it to the children that I work with? You also might want to look for patterns in a story. This is a little tiny story from Indonesia, and I'm going to make my arm into a hill. Our body is wonderful to be turned into all kinds of wonderful things. I have a hill, and what's going up my hill but a turtle? And how does the turtle go up the hill? Creepy, 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 creepy. A snake goes up the hill. How does a snake move? Slither, 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 slither. The rabbit goes up the hill. Now, this is a playful, fun part. And again, another way to engage children, make it fun. So I've got my rabbit ears, and my rabbit is a very exuberant rabbit. It's going to go boing, 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 boing up the hill. And the bear goes up the hill, thud, 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 thud. and the great big rock at the top of the hill goes bumpity, 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 crash. So that little rhyme, again, all you need to know, you've got a hill and you have animals going up it. You can ask the children, so what animals are going up the hill? How do they move? Take it outside. What animals do you see? You see a squirrel. How would the squirrel go up the hill? And also you can take something like that and turn it into a bigger story. Celia Lottridge, who is one of the founders of the Parent-Child Mother Goose program, and one of my favorite storytellers, I have to say, she took that little rhyme and she turned it into a story called The Great Big Enormous Rock. And it's about all the animals that decide to have a picnic on the top of the hill. But when they get there, what's there but a great big rock? And the story just goes on from there. How do the animals push that rock off so that they can have their picnic? And so the other thing is, of course, engagement, audience involvement. When you're telling a story, you are drawing the children in with your eyes. So you can engage all of them. You're not looking at a book, you can draw them all in. And maybe you can leave out a word, so they have to put in a word. Or maybe you have to have them guess. Here's a little rhyme. Here's a box, here's its lid. I wonder whatever inside is hid. Why, it's a butterfly, without any doubt. Let's open the box and let it out. And there goes the butterfly. It could be anything inside that box. You could have the children guess what's inside. They could do it themselves, but then you could take it outside and go, where do things hide? Where can we look under rocks? Can we look under leaves? Can we look in the streams to find where animals, creatures are living? So I want you to choose stories that you love. That's going to come out. You know, there's the chocolate cake theory that, you know, everyone has their own unique way of telling a story, and you'll have your way. But, you know, there's many ways to make a chocolate cake, and guess what? They're all delicious. And so the way you tell a story will be delicious too, because you're bringing your love of the story to those children. Make sure it has a strong beginning, because the way you start a story is how you help children come into the story that you're creating. And how do I learn a story that's longer than 4 lines? I'll read it over and over and over, put the paper down, and then what I'll do is I'll just think about the bare bones of the story. This happened, then this happened, then this happened. Then I'll start to visualize. So where does the story take place? What are the sounds? What are the smells? What are the colors of the story? Same with who's ever in it, whether it's animals or people. So that's a good way to enhance the story. And, you know, things often happen in threes. There's patterns, as Nancy said, there's repetition, there's chants, there's all kinds of things to make storytelling very accessible for you to tell, as well as for you to have the children be involved in that story. So I'm going to just end with a short little story. I think it's only 3 minutes, so I hope I'm still within my time. And this is a story found in many cultures around the world. This particular version is found in South America with the Quechua people of Peru and Ecuador. And it's called The Little Hummingbird. This is the story of a great forest that caught on fire. It was a terrible fire, and it raged and burned, and all the animals had to flee their homes. The fox ran, the wolf ran, the lizard scurried, and the frogs all leapt away. And above them, the birds flew in a panic. And then all the creatures gathered at the edge of the forest, and they watched as their houses burned, all except for one. Little Hummingbird did not fly away from the forest. Little Hummingbird flew as quickly as she could to the stream, and there she picked up a drop of water in her little beak, and she flew back to the raging fire, and she dropped that drop of water onto the fire. And then she went back to the stream and she got some more water. And she continued that way, back and forth and back and forth, each time picking up drops of water and letting them fall onto that raging fire. Well, the animals just stood there and watched Little Hummingbird, and they were frightened. "What can I do?" sobbed the rabbit. "The fire is so big and I'm really scared." "My wings will burn," said the owl. "I'm so little," croaked the frog, "and the fire is so big." "There's nothing I can do," howled the wolf. And yet there the animals stood, and meanwhile Little Hummingbird continued her work, back and forth and back and forth to the stream, bringing more water and letting those drops of water fall onto the raging fire. Finally, Bear said, "Little Hummingbird, what are you doing?" Little Hummingbird looked at the animal standing there in fear, and she said, "I'm doing what I can." And that's the story. And I love that story because it talks about how it reminds me that we can always do something. And it's not always the largest or the loudest that can do something. Sometimes it's the littles. And I think we can learn from that. But I also hope that all of us can be like little hummingbirds. We have the opportunity, because we're working with children, to expand their horizons, engage in their curiosities and their wonder and awe through telling stories to them, so that our communities and our environment are all that much better under their care as they grow. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Oh, what a lovely story. I don't think I've ever heard that one before. Very inspiring. Now, if any of you have any questions that you would like to ask of Nancy or Kate, please type them into the chat now. And I have a few questions to help get the ball rolling. And I'm wondering, now maybe I'll direct this question to Nancy. How early can you start sharing books and stories with children? Would you share books with babies, for example?
I would start reading before those babies were born, Kathy. I would, yeah, I would. There's some research that talks about how babies recognize their parents' voices as soon as they're born. So if they're obviously, as they get bigger, growing inside their mom, they are they're learning the sound of the voice. So singing some of those nice songs and reading a story would be lovely. But definitely, brand new babies, pull out your books. I brought this tonight to just these are called Indestructible Books, and they are great for those little guys, probably not newborns, but as kids get older and they like to chew on books, you can put this into your dishwasher or washing machine and hang it up to dry, and they will last. So it's a great. So yes, as soon as you feel comfortable, start reading, telling stories. Tell some stories about your childhood, because babies will benefit from that as they start to understand and get to hear about your childhood.
Kathy, I'm just going to address a couple of messages that were sent about who wrote some of the books that I mentioned. And I want to say that both Nancy and I prepared our top 10 favorite books. And I have to say, I went beyond 10 because there are just so many. I go to the library on a regular basis. I used to work at the library, and I'm always looking at the new books that are coming in and adding them to my growing list of resources. And there's just wonderful books out there. So I know Kathy is going to send those lists, and both The Trees and The Petal Perch Climb are on my list. So you'll be able to see who the authors and illustrators are of those books.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Now, I have another question that has maybe a little bit of preamble to it, because I grew up in a family that wasn't very nature oriented. And I know my mother was afraid of a lot of things outdoors, and we didn't ever go camping. And yet I have this absolute passion for nature and the natural world. And to a large extent, I attribute that to the stories that my parents used to read to me at bedtime. And I so clearly remember, and I think maybe these are outdated now, I don't even know if they're still in print, but there was a series called the Burgess books. You know, it was Peter Cottontail and Bob White, and they were chapter books. And I remember my parents reading them to me, you know, a chapter a night at bedtime. And I would get so wrapped up in the story. I can still remember that little Bob White that got shot by a hunter, and you know, Farmer Brown's boy takes him in and helps him to heal. And for me, I got to the point where I couldn't wait until the next night to hear the next chapter. And for me, and I was maybe 4 at the time, and for me, that was my incentive to start to learn to read. I was just, you know, beside myself. I had to learn to read so that I could find out what was going to happen next. And so for me, that really helped to create an absolute passion for books and a passion for nature. And all this was taking place indoors in a family that wasn't very nature oriented. So I'm so grateful for those opportunities. And I'm wondering, having given you that preamble, do you have any fond memories from your own childhoods, both you and Nancy, and I'll direct this to Kate first, of experiencing any nature-based stories?
Well, I can tell you a couple of things. We used to spend some time with my grandparents up at a cottage. Now, there was no running water, there was no electricity. And my grandmother embraced the woods and the acres of land that surrounded this cottage. And we would go out, we would go out and we would actually make fairy gardens. And I think that was one of the things Nancy was actually going to talk about. So just finding small things that we could plant in a container, and then talk about what, you know, who lived in that little fairy world. My grandfather also made lots of paths. So we were always walking the paths, going to the beaver dams, but also a very clear memory. And again, this is my grandfather. There was wallpaper on a wall when I used to stay over at their house, and it was filled with, it was a farm scene, it was animals. And he would tell me stories about what was going on in that wallpaper, the wallpaper. And to this day, I can picture the wallpaper, and I can picture the stories of, you know, the people that were farming and the animals. So that's a very vivid memory for me. And, you know, I also grew up in my father was a folk musician, and he would tell stories through songs. So songs about frogs, songs, you know, that just, again, made me appreciate a lot of going outside, of things that were inside, as you said, Kathy. And same with all these books, you read them inside, but there's so much potential for them outside.
Thank you, Kate. And I wonder if Nancy has anything to add to that. Do you have any fond memories from your own childhood
Yeah, so
related to stories?
I was thinking about this. So I talked a little bit at the beginning, but the connection to nature, I think. So my dad was a big nature person. He was a conservation officer. He was always bringing home baby foxes we raised. We had raccoons. We had all kinds of abandoned babies that he would bring home and we would raise. And I remember being fascinated with those stories of, because there were lots of stories about the mountains, and the families would raise the babies. And I also, I was thinking about, this is not connected, but it's kind of connected. Reading the story Heidi, where she was in the Alps, and she loved to be out in the meadow and enjoyed like the sunshine on her face. I have those memories of those descriptions, I think. Is what sticks with me, and I could kind of relate to, because my dad was like always taking us out and about, and who knows where we would end up. And luckily my mother didn't know, because she was probably kind of like your mom, Kathy, that she wasn't a real outdoorsy person. But yeah, I think the experiences, and then when you read the stories, you connect to those experiences.
Absolutely. Now, we do have one question in the chat, and we should probably wrap up fairly shortly because we're just a little past 8 o'clock. But there's a question now, where can we get the Indestructible books? I think you were talking about them, Nancy.
So we've lost our little independent bookstores in Peterborough, unfortunately. And that's where I have got them in the past, but I know that you can get them on Amazon. And it's possible that if you went into to the toy store, because they do have some books, she might be able to order them for you, but I have seen them on Amazon.
And I think that the bookstore in Lakefield will order books for you as well, if you're still wanting to patronize small independent bookstores. And I don't know, Kate, do you have any other sources of the Indestructible books?
No. No. Short answer.
Okay, does anyone else in the audience know of any other places that you can get those books? Or I wonder whether do Peterborough Child and Family Centers, do they have them in their collection, Nancy?
We do have them for lending. So if you wanted to borrow them, definitely we do have some. And they've got quite a few different titles now. This one was Old MacDonald. This one I wanted to it's Old MacDonald Had a Farm, but it's in Peru or South America, because they have a llama, and they have brightly colored clothes, so they look like it looks like Peru to me. So I thought that was, I think they're kind of they're pretty interesting, the different illustrations that you'll find in them. But I had them with my grandkids and have used them well.
Okay, we have thank you. Oh, and there's directly from the Indestructibles website. Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Great. Well, thanks to everyone for joining us tonight, and a special thanks to Nancy and Kate for sharing all your wonderful ideas. I hope we can get together and do this again sometime. But for now, we'll close. And just a reminder that I will send you a link to the recording for the workshop, and I'll also send you Nancy and Kate's lists of their favorite nature books for young children. So thanks again to everyone.
Can I just end with a little rhyme, which I think would be a nice closing rhyme? Here is the baby. Here is a baby. Here's her bed. Here's her pillow. And here is her head. Pull up her covers. Pull them up tight. Sing her a lullaby. Tell her a story. And Kiss her good night.
Lovely. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you. That was fun. Nice to see everybody out there.